It's been 2 years since I started living abroad. Like, I've been peeling away from everything I've ever known because I grew up in the same spot in Canada and kind of had similar people, similar ambitions, similar societal structure. And for the last 2 years, I've been doing anything but that, tossing myself in environments on 4 different continents, opening my mind to what this world has. And for the most part, I've been doing it alone. Right now, I'm in Bujumbura, Burundi. I wanted to share 4 lessons learned from traveling: trust/gut feeling. I grew up with trust that was kind of fake. It was either blind trust, protected trust, or outsourced trust. Blind trust is naive. It's going into public places or meeting people and not even thinking about trust because it's implied. Protected trust is having someone who you can bypass trust through, like a friend or a mom or a teacher. You can be with a stranger, but if one of them are there, you can shortcut trust. Outsourced trust is someone else having the final say, like a parent or a teacher, in what you can and cannot do. And these 3 things aren't really a good training ground for actually knowing how to trust people. When you go out and you go to different cultures, you start to realize you can't just rely on your assumptions. You can't just outsource it. You don't have someone who's necessarily protecting you and has your 100% best interest in mind. Learning how to actually judge people, actually read their intentions beneath what they're saying, that's a product of practicing street smarts. That's a product of saying, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go to a place where I don't speak the language. I'm going to go to a place that I've never been before and figure it out. There are precautions you can take, but still you can't protect yourself from everything. And so by virtue of putting yourself in those stretch experiences, you learn who to trust and who not to trust. And then from there, you can start becoming your own person. You can start thinking about what your own opinions are, because your whole life you relied on other people's trust. But now you're practicing how to think for yourself. That translates. Maybe later on, it's not about trust. It's about choice or friendship or strategic decisions in the company that you're running. It's learning how to read other people and then interpret it back out. I'm so glad I had that gut feeling and trust within me, because there's a situation in Jamaica where sketchy interactions don't necessarily start sketchy. It's not someone coming up to you and making a provocative comment. It normally starts okay. And then it kind of becomes a slippery slope of what you say yes to. I knew when to leave, and I knew that was not worth the downside. It's made me not become a victim to womanhood, especially the rhetorics of womanhood. There are very real gender issues in the West, in the East, in the whole world. But I think that there's a point where complaining and chaining ourselves down to that victimhood is not practical. Instead, I found that the trust and gut check has really helped me embrace being a woman, solo traveling, but also doing it with reality in mind. The next thing is kind of piggybacking off of that, and that's self-reliance. The key thing to self-reliance is owning the decisions you make, not blaming them on other people, knowing what's important to me, being prepared for that, and then considering budget. I was in Vietnam, and there was one point where I was planning the Sapa portion of my trip, and I thought to myself, I can go really cheap here. But after a bunch of travel in Hanoi, I thought, you know what, maybe I'll want like a hotel. So you go back to that triangle. Okay, I was prepared for this. I knew I wanted a hotel. I knew I wanted to save some money for that. Do I cut down something on the trip? Or can I make a little bit more budget for this experience so I can accommodate that preparedness and ultimately own that decision? You need all 3 elements of that triangle to work together to become self-reliant. So you have to know what you want, have the means to get what you want, and own that decision. So you can't just know what you want, have the means to get to what you want, and then complain about it. This ownership piece also intersects with trust, because you have to own when someone else is bullying you into something. When I was in Bali, I was chased by this man, thankfully midday, and he was just like carrying this box of things to sell, like tourist trinkets. And he just kept asking me. Like, I was a little bit not confrontational because I wanted to be nice. I wanted to be, oh, you have a beautiful, wood piece. Like, it's really nice. Sorry, like I'm not interested. I was really bullied into buying that like random wooden box thing. And from there, I learned like I cannot. If I keep going like this, like people are going to dictate what happens to my life. I'm going to complain that I'm losing resources and that they're ruining my itinerary, but ultimately I'm the owner of this. And that is the essence of self-reliance. Okay, next up is appreciating complexity with growing up in a bubble, bursting that bubble, and seeing like 10 million other bubbles and realizing, wait, there's components that work from all of these different things and they're not mutually exclusive. Like, me practicing my religion doesn't stop someone else from practicing their religion. It's not these axes that we simplify them down to because that's what our brains enjoy. Actually, when I was in Singapore, I was taking a multivariable calculus class. It was this like great combination of having this mathematical way of thinking Also exploring a bunch of different cultures, different languages, different religions, different political structures, and traveling to all these places. Those two things aligned really well with appreciating the complexity and the variety of cultural traditions. Things are three-dimensional or four-dimensional or 12-dimensional. There's so many different angles, and it really depends which way you're looking at it to truly evaluate. And I'm thinking about limits existing and, you know what, beyond the scope of this video. But the point is that the world is not linear. It is not this box or this box. Like, our minds are far too complex to put them into camps of liberal and conservative, evil and good. Ultimately, what does this do? What does this appreciation of complexity bring back? I think this is the most practical thing I've learned in terms of career tangible skills, because learning how to appreciate complexity has brought it back to how I think about statistics, analyze texts, how I go through and make opinions about the world, realizing that things are not so simple. I've learned to remain open to hypotheses, to appreciate counter arguments. These are analytical skills. And I think sometimes we can get caught in our groupthink, our biases, our primitive desire to be liked. And by seeing the world in all of its complexity, I've been able to move away from those, I think, bad habits of mine. And the last thing is I've learned how to not be materialistic about my happiness. When you live out of a suitcase, your expression is relatively limited. You have to distill what is important to you in a couple of items. Do you care about skincare? Do you care about working out? Do you care about bright colors? Do you care about neutrals? Do you care about things that you don't have to wash that frequently? What do you want to spend your time doing? And then you have to condense it all. It's this combination of having a little bit of things to express yourself and then cultural rules that are new that you have to succumb by. And then you have to find yourself in that middle. And I started to become way more comfortable with who I was, what I wanted, what I cared about, because I could no longer let the values of my society define me or the values of my things. And I think that is such a valuable journey to have. I'm going to the rural parts of Burundi in a couple of days, but this is the main city. I'm really grateful to be here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this video.